Hi, I'm Martha Johnson. I am a singer-songwriter. Mostly known for my work in Martha and the Muffins. A lovely name for a band.
You didn't look back or too far ahead.
Most of my friends were really into music. I followed bands from England, and a friend of mine who I'd been in a band with asked me if I wanted to join. There were three of us. There was Mark and him and me, and that was the beginning. When the band started in 1977, there wasn't really a scene.
At that time in Toronto in the early 70s, there wasn't really any place to play. Toronto had transitioned from being a place where great artists could play their own music to being a top 40 bars.
I mean, we were basically just pulled right out of that, and I think as Martha's talked about, we were going into press junkets with the entire, London music press there. And
we went to England. We recorded Metro music at the Manor Studios. Echo Beach came up, it was on that album, and that was our second single. And it went to the top 10 of the charts. We played Top of the Pops, and it had a real whirlwind success. When Echo Beach became a big hit, first in England and in Europe, we were put into a whole new world. We were the focus of the press and the people, and it was very exciting.
After their World is a Ball album, which they recorded in Bath in England for a while, and they started recording their new album called Modern Lullaby, and they decided they wanted to move back to Canada, and they did. They approached me and said that they wanted to release this album. Just before the album was about to be released, Martha phoned me up and said, well, I have some news. And I said, oh, what's that? It's just, I'm pregnant. And so we won't be touring.
I really liked being in a band because it was taking an idea for a song and just expanding on it. But it was great meeting new fans. After the show, some of the fans would come to talk to us. They were all thrilled to meet us. Something happened with my hand, with my arm. When I reached for my water beside my bed, my arm would make this strange sort of wave to go to pick up the water. And when I was doing my children's show for Songs from the Treehouse, because I did shows, solo shows in schools, I had a puppet that I had in one of my songs, and the puppet kept twitching, sort of. It was just uncontrollable.
she showed me, and I thought, well, that's a bit odd. And she said, yeah, I started getting nervous, and I don't ever get nervous doing kids shows. And there was something about it. She said, maybe I was nervous and I didn't realize it, and it was just some sort of little shake.
When I walked on the snow in the park, one foot showed a drag, and the other foot was okay. And I thought that was unusual.
When she did go to her GP, she said, well, you should go see a neurologist, which she did. And to my everlasting regret, I didn't go with her. I think it was his last appointment of the day on a Friday. Martha says he was kind of in a big hurry to, go home, I guess, and said, you've got it. And I think she said, will I ever be in a wheelchair? And he said, well, possibly. And that was kind of it, right? And so she came home, and I remember standing in the kitchen and her telling me, and it's like every major piece of bad news you might get in your life where you kind of go, well, I don't really believe this is happening. But at the same time, your brain is going, okay, this is going to be a big moment in our lives.
After I was diagnosed, which was a difficult time, I didn't want to change anything. I wanted everything to stay the same. I remember thinking I'd take a video of myself so so I could show my daughter, who was 8 years old at the time, what I used to be like. Because I knew it was going to change. I knew my health would deteriorate. By then, I'd done some research and I knew some of the symptoms that would come. So I had to get used to these symptoms, but they weren't very strong for quite a while, for years.
For 3 years, she didn't tell anybody. Nobody knew about it. And I've heard that's quite typical with people that are diagnosed with PD. They go, I don't want anyone to know about this. And I think part of it is that you're probably just dealing with it yourself, right? You're trying to come to terms with it.
Parkinson's disease is the fast-growing neurological disorder. It's a neurodegenerative disease. It's actually more of a syndrome, meaning that it's not a single entity, but there are more causes, often genetics, often environmental, often a combination of both. Pathological standpoint is characterized by the lack of, or the death of certain neurons producing dopamine. So people with Parkinson's typically lack this neurotransmitter that we call dopamine, but it's not just that. Together with this, there's the neurodegeneration of other parts of the brain, not necessarily involvement in movement. But Parkinson's per se is seen as a movement disorder, indicating that it's a disease affecting the mobility of people suffering from it. And typically people have slowness of their movement that we call bradykinesia. That's the hallmark of the problem. Together with it, there might be muscle stiffness that we call rigidity, and there might be tremor. Actually, a lot of people think that Parkinson's means tremor, but actually a lot of people with Parkinson's don't have tremor. Really, what makes the disease a problem to people is not too much the tremor, it's rather the slowness, because they often have problem with walking, with balance, and that becomes more and more of a problem as the disease progresses.
I think one of the big things is that we know there's 100,000 people who live with Parkinson's here in Canada, and that number is expected to rise. We do know there's not enough services. There's not enough doctors to care for people living with Parkinson's. At the same time, the resources that are so important for them. So we think about singing, speech therapy, physical therapy. How do we know that they are getting that right support to have the best quality of life? We currently don't have any what we would call disease-modifying therapies that stop the disease or slow down the disease. But in the meantime, we do know the importance of exercise, community, a sense of belonging is so critical to ensure that they have the best quality of life.
The 10-year mark was when things really changed. And it's just a gradual deterioration. And then you get on to all the medication. And the medication is, you have to start to get used to taking all these drugs. The way my life changed professionally was that I had been doing school shows, and that was like a one-woman show. I'd take the bin with all my props. I'd lug it up the stairs to the school all by myself, and did all the driving and everything. And that changed eventually. I had to give that up. And I've had to find new ways of recording. That's fine because it introduced me to a lot of techniques that I didn't have before.
In one sense, it wasn't a big thing when Martha told me that that she had Parkinson's, but gradually, it became apparent more that Martha didn't have the stamina and that she wasn't going to be able to go out and play live the way that they had before.
I think the writing of songs and being in the studio, just seeing what you can make of thin air. Like, you have nothing. You build a song piece by piece. You're never sure what it's going to turn out like, or who's going to be moved by it. And you're trying to communicate your feelings, and you do it through your voice and your heart. And if you can't express yourself, like I'm having trouble right now expressing myself, you feel cut off from the world. So in making this song, Slow Motion, it was great to be working with some people who also had Parkinson's, but were committed to still maintaining their personality that they'd had before.
You know, she's a remarkably strong person. I mean, she's in her, 2 decade plus years with this, and she's always been really strong. I mean, she has weak moments, but it's not her character that's weak, it's the disease, it's not her.
It all started with a post-it. I wrote a music project and I put it in front of my screen. Immediately my mind went to Marta because I've known her for a while. I thought about her and I thought about Fabio. My idea was very simple. I said, you are the musicians, you are the professional. I don't have to tell you what you want to do, but I can tell you two things. First, that I would like this to be a testament to this celebration of resilience. It's a term that we used, unfortunately, too much during COVID. But the point is that when you get a diagnosis, it's not the end of your life, it's not the end of your professional life, and more importantly, it's not the end of your creative life. And the other one that I want this project to go to, if possible, was a celebration of slowness, pausing, reflection, as opposed to how life runs these days, which is quite the opposite.
When we started writing slow motion, I purposely wanted to write something that was not an obvious picture of the disease. I wanted it to be something that had poetry to it and had would move people in a way that would let them see people with Parkinson's in a different light. I don't sing the word Parkinson's anywhere in the song, but the feeling still gets across to people.
Dr. Fadon has been talking to me about Marta a long time. Oh, you gotta put the guys together, see what can come out of it. So we met, and then I just I had the music idea, some chords, some melodies. I had put together in a stick, pen drive. I gave it to her.
Fabio and I went our separate ways, and we each wrote a song.
I wrote originally a chord sequence and then a couple of melody suggestions for melody that I sent to her, and then she was the one that brushed the whole thing, put the whole thing together.
Put the two songs together, which became Slow Motion.
I'm moving in slow motion now.
Recording music is difficult, all right? That's just a fact. Coming into a studio or even on a stage, playing live, playing well is difficult. It requires, practice and focus and clarity, and your physical body needs to be in control and all of those things. And then when you add to it the studio environment, which is like a super microscopic look at what you're doing, it magnifies all those needs. They become even greater.
I'm moving in slow
Not saying you have to
motion.
think about the rest of it. Okay.
I wanted to create a song that wasn't cliche. I want something that people could rally around. It would touch a lot of people. Something that was anthemic. So it would have to have some voices to express this. So I decided that a choir. I ended up getting 5 wonderful people just to be the choir, and we just doubled voices and make this 5 voices sound like 50.
Martha had kind of built up an arrangement that she had imagined for multiple singers to be kind of a choral element to the song that we were working on. Every individual had slightly different sets of challenges around what we were going to do. But they also were game. They were gamers. They were ready to get in there and do it. Some of them got way outside their comfort zone very quickly. Others found their way to make that a comfort zone very quickly. And a couple of them, I think, grew enormously in the process.
Well, that was quite quite an experience because there were 5 of us arrayed in a sort of a semicircle in front of two mics. We had these layers and layers and layers of sound. It was fascinating. As I mentioned, it sounded like a huge choir when in fact there were only 5 of us. There was a sense of excitement, a sense of passion that became evident. And that was, even though we're not trained singers, that became evident in our vocal tracks. You could tell there was excitement. When you're diagnosed with Parkinson's, you have to accept that your life is going to change. So you just have to tailor your cloth to suit the situation.
The idea is to build a big choir with just 5 voices.
I'm moving in slow motion now. I'm moving in slow motion now. I'm moving in slow motion now. There ain't steam or speed. That's where we wanna be.
I think it took a lot out of her to get this going. But then that day of the recording with all the people in the backing choir, I mean, I think that just made it. I guess there was a big sigh of relief at the end of the day when we came home and went, wow, you pulled that off. It turned out really great. And people were saying such good things about her pulling this together. I think it made her feel, that she actually had accomplished something beyond, her normal skill set.
I don't think they cut us any slack, which is good because that means you've got to live up to a certain level of expectation. And I never felt that we were being given a break. And I think that my colleagues, my fellow backup vocalists would probably feel the same way. And that's good to know. You don't feel patronized because you've got Parkinson's. And I think Martha and the Muffins is a primary example of somebody who 22, 23 years into having been diagnosed with Parkinson's is still active in her field. And the lesson that we take away from all of this, all of us who are involved in this project, is that yes, having Parkinson's will change your life and will go on changing your life. But that doesn't mean that you can't live a rich and rewarding and fulfilling life nonetheless.
Slow emotion is an interesting pair of words. And let's just leave it at that. I mean, I think there's a certain kind of joy that you hear in the background vocal parts that was, first of all, it was unexpected to me, and second of all, it was fantastic. They're just singing la la la, but listen to how engaged. Maybe it's just me, but I just hear joy in that. I hear joy in that.
I think the studio experience for some of the people involved was uplifting. It was a new door opening. They accomplished something that they didn't realize they could do, and that's always good for anybody, but especially people with Parkinson's, because you're losing so many things. It's nice to gain a skill, or to be able to say I did this thing. I feel quite lucky to be able to do what I love to do. I mean, most of the things that I do now musically are very satisfying. It's a part of who I am, part of an integral part of my life. I hold on to that, and I not only do it, I think I do it quite well. We just keep making music with other people, and we have ideas for new songs.
One thing is knowing the disease, one thing is living with the disease. And what's important to me might not be necessarily important to someone living with it. So this is already happening, and it's refreshing to see all this partnership that is flourishing more and more year by year. And at the end of the day, what we're doing with this song is also indicating that. And I'm pleased that I had a role, marginal, in initiating it, and also a role as a musician in the recording.
You know, we hear about people who are diagnosed with Parkinson's, and we automatically think about losing. We think about tremors. We think about people's inability to do things. But what Martha and company have demonstrated is the potential that comes from, even with a diagnosis, things are still possible. This is really a story of bringing that community together, demonstrating the possibilities, and it is still possible to thrive.
If there was one thing that you could tell yourself the day that you were diagnosed with Parkinson's, what would it be?
I would tell myself, you're still going to be yourself. You're still the essence of Martha Johnson will still be there, because the essence of who you are is inside you. It's not what you see on the outside.
I'm waiting for the sun to rise, so I can see that look in your eyes. Empathy, not sympathy, that's where we wanna be. Take it slow, and then you'll know how to be kind, how to free your mind. That's where we wanna be. I'm living so emotion now. I'm living so emotion now. Where we wanna be.